I got a One Piece video for you guys today, and it's one of these theories of mine. You know, it's about Mihawk. So Mihawk, we know him to be the world's strongest swordsman currently in the world. One Piece. He can't be beat when it comes to the sword skills, right? But who's he related to? That's basically what this video is about. And what I think his past might show us, in the future. I'm looking at, what other people are looking at too. We got Emu and Mihawk. They have the same eyes, the double ringed eyes. Some people on the internet say Emu is the father of Mihawk, but I don't think it's quite like that. I don't think it's quite that direct. I do think they're related though. I think Emu, who's from the Nerona line, Nerona, Emu, that's the family that Emu hails from, the Nerona line, right? So 800 years ago, there were some Neronas that were like, we want to stay here on this island, wherever the fuck they're originally from, right? They're just like, we'll stay here and we'll hold down while you do what you do up there. And like, he didn't forget about them, but he didn't like, always check up on them either. You know, he's kind of, ruling the world and doing all this other shit, right? But he left them with like a message to basically find and eliminate the D clan members, you know, and their job was essentially to do that, keep people from learning information. But at the same time, they were to, keep that land that was, or island that was, the Neronas, theirs, right? Because all those people went to the Red Line, right? But they were originally from other islands, other places. The Nerona family that went to the Red Line was, Emu and whoever else was. But then his like other family stayed wherever the fuck they were at. They never lost their status either. Now, 800 years later, and Mihawk pops out. Mihawk happens to be a kid who gets good education and other things because he's from this noble lineage, the Nerona line. He goes to school, he gets trained in swordsmanship, he takes to the sword real quick. Now, Mihawk and his backstory, I don't know. I think this boy might have had it like tough. He might have had a rough childhood. Like his family might have been killed off. Um, he himself might have left his family. You know, I don't know. And then when it comes to his blade, I was debating on, does his blade have devil fruit? I don't think so. When it comes to Yoru and the meaning of Yoru, it means night or evening. I don't think it has any kind of like shadow devil fruit or anything like that. We already know Gecko Moria and Blackbeard has the darkness devil fruit, so his sword don't have devil fruit. And if he did, we would have seen that shit way before now, right? Oh, we should have, right? He actually, I do believe he's actually, obtained the blade, right? He darkened it, through, real challenges, fighting, And in the past, I've had Mihawk low on my list, right? And I don't have him like low, but I don't have him as high as everybody else. He's top two in the verse. I'm like, he ain't beating Luffy, and I still believe that. He ain't beating Luffy. He ain't beating Loki. He ain't beating Luffy. You know, the guy, I don't know if he even has Conqueror's Haki, but for a person who doesn't have Conqueror's Haki, he's basically like, one of them guys. He's basically on the level of like an admiral, but slightly above them because of his swordsmanship. You know, being the greatest. And then the eyes, there's something with those, you know. people in the Nerona family probably had those kind of eyes, the double ringed eyes, and then he inherited that trait from his family members. But also, Mihawk as a person, not necessarily a Nerona thing, he became a guy who could tap into observation. So what? So yeah, um, he did all that shit himself. Emu being the father of Mihawk, I don't think so. Emu has white hair. Emu has the devil's fruit. And devil fruits don't get passed on that way. But why would Mihawk go to Marine Ford and be, not showing out that much? He did his little sword slash thing, and guess what? Joseph threw that shit up in the air. Joseph's a Yonko Commander 3. Not the most powerful guy, and he's able to throw that shit away. He was trying to test Whitebeard, and Whitebeard said, "My son got me. My son protected me. I didn't even have to do anything." Whitebeard ain't sweating it. Now I don't think it's the ass whooping per se. I think it's a high difficulty fight. I think the Mihawk, community might be a little bit crazy, because if you think that Mihawks above Shanks, and you actually believe that, you're basically saying that Zoro's above Shanks, because you know about how the story is planning to go, and that's basically what people are saying. I can't say that. I can't say that. I can't even say that he's close. That close to Shanks. So Zoro, or like Zoro's above, Shanks. If you Emu fans or Mihawk fans who believe he's the son of Emu, and then he's also above Shanks. You're saying that Zoro's above Shanks too, and I know you don't believe that. Don't think she's like that. And I'm not saying again, Mihawk is the strongest swordsman in the world, so he has to be top 10 by now. But Conqueror's Hockey's not confirmed. We've never seen him use it to knock anybody out. He's always pulled the sword out and cut through shit. And then people were, afraid from that alone. Right? But I don't even think he has it. I think he's just one of these guys who really he came up with the swordsmanship, and he took to that shit real quick. Either his parents put him onto that shit and was like, son, you'll be, a swordsman. We want you to do this for us. A proper man, of our, family. I need you to be a swordsman, and that's what he did. And then he, reads, he cooks, he does all that shit. We know he does because later on he's reading books. Making food for Corona and Zoro, during the time skip. But yeah, man, this guy, something also something happened with him and his family too. Maybe he got away from them, or they were all eliminated. They may have gotten wiped out because of some things. Emu just didn't want that shit anymore. By the time Mihawk's generation comes through, Emu then now he sends people because shit's getting crazy now. They got Gold Roger and they got this guy, and they're in the news now, right? By this point, and basically you haven't done your job, because now I have to deal with these guys. So now I'm gonna eliminate you guys because you didn't do your job. These guys trying to come after me. he's a descendant of Rox D. Zebek. Now I have to wipe all you people out. And he was the only one that survived. You know, could have been a buster call kind of thing, and they sent that shit to the island. And they're like, oh shit, we gotta get off the island, and he was the only one that survived. And then later on, he's a marine hunter. He kills these people. I mean, that's a reason to hate the Marines. You killed my family, and I'm the last one left. Mihawk and Zoro, that fight's gonna be ridiculous. But I don't think that Mihawk's the son of Emu. But I do believe they're he's from the Nerona line of peoples. And then you're like, but his name's Dracula Mihawk. Name changes happen. We know that Rox D. Zebek is actually David D. Zebek. Why would you think that he couldn't do the same thing? It ain't completely not a possibility. And then the emu and him being the son of emu ain't a stretch either. But I think it's stretching a bit too much. I think it is, because if he actually was the son of emu, he would have been a better character. He wouldn't have left when Shanks showed up. He would have stayed there and tried to fight. He's already fought Shanks prior too. It ain't like, you can't be like, oh, well, he's, this way or that way about Shanks. No, he's fought Shanks before. I believe he's slightly overrated, but I'm also very intrigued by him myself. Like, just like, what is his backstory? We've seen him so many times. We've seen him more than Dragon, right? We've seen his, like, fighting feats more than Dragons. He's one of the guys I want to, like, know about more. And we'll get that during the fight with Zoro and Mihawk. That's probably when it's going to happen, unfortunately. It ain't going to happen before that. It's going to happen then. And that's years away. But I can't wait for it. Because I'm just like, this guy is, very, like, reserved and other things. And, that's probably just, how he's always been. But I think his, like, backstory is still, like, dark, he can still be a introverted or calm, cool, and collected guy, but like there's still something there, some like tragedies and shit from his backstory, and then like who gave him the sword and shit like that. How did he obtain Yoru? I'm here for that, man. I'm not a Mihawk fan, but I'm intrigued to find out, who this guy is, what his backstory is, that kind of thing. But be cool, call in the corner, and let me know what you think about Mihawk in the comments. You think I'm hating him, or you think, you agree with these other people who think he's the son of Emu? Or do you think it's something that, what I said, he ain't the son of Emu, but he's related by, like, family lineage, the Nerona line of rulers, right? Or, the celestial dragons, And we don't even know Emu's backstory. We don't know how he necessarily, became the one that ruled over all. They probably all did come under him and other things. But, there's a lot of stuff we gotta learn. And he's one of the things we haven't learned yet. We don't know everything about him. We know more than we know about. We know more about him than we do about Dragon. But we don't know all of that. Be cool, follow in the corner, y'all, and let me know what you think in the comments.